shangwe na porojo. Zenye kuleta chuki kati yetu. Nitatetea haki za Wakenya. Wala sitakubali ukabila. Sitaharibu mali ya wengine. Na majirani wangu nitalinda. Wenye nchi wenzangu, kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Wenye nchi, kipenzi chetu, hatutaiacha milele daima. Tushangilie Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, Kenya tunayoipenda. Tushangilie Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, Kenya tunayoipenda. Kenya nchi tunayoipenda. Kenya nchi tunayoipenda.
All right. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Amerix. Welcome to the Citizen Assembly today on Sunday. And I am still bringing on board our guests and our speakers. I can see Mercy, I can see Willis, I can see Dennis. Dennis has told me that he's just landed in Moscow and he's waiting to settle down so that he can join us. But I have sent you Willis, Mercy. I'm waiting for you to join. We are 6 minutes late. And today we are going to have a big discussion on the debt burden, the burden of debt. Why are we paying debt that doesn't belong to us? Why are we paying for money that someone took and pocketed? So we are going to have this very uncomfortable discussion. And I want to mention that this platform does not promote any political agenda, because we believe politicians and the political class are the reason why we are in this problem. So this platform does not promote any politician and does not promote any political agenda. This is a platform for citizens to come together and discuss and prosecute their problems and identify solution and take action. For example, we want to identify and see, are we able to prosecute all those politicians who have pocketed our money? So we are here today, and as we wait for these others to join in, I just want to give the mic to 1 or 2, 3 people, my co-hosts. 2 of them, I've sent them a link. Let me see who is ready to talk. Let me see. All right. Thank you very much for joining. It's not easy to, to run such a big space, and I really appreciate for your patience. And all right. Right. Like I can start with Joe Balash. Welcome. How are you? What do you want to tell us? Hello. Hello. Joe Baliach, please speak. You have the mic so that someone else can join in. Don't get the mic and then you mute it.
Thank you so much, Senior, for the mic. Thank you so much for hosting us this evening. Pretty much looking forward to the conversation on the public debt, largely to hear the insights on the odious debt that has been made public recently. Also, just to chime in on the ongoings, I'd say we need to keep the spirit really, really high and don't let our guard down at any point. This is us facing real-time challenges that need real-time solutions. So thanks so much for the mic, Amerix. Back to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe Baleat. Where are you calling us from? Are you a Kenyan?
Yes. I'm a Kenyan. Currently in Nairobi.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's meet on Tuesday.
Tuesday it is.
Willis, welcome. You can kickstart the discussion.
Thank you very much, Amerix, for inviting us and hosting this forum again. The main important thing that we hope to achieve out of this is that the Kenyan people need to understand why they are being overtaxed and where their money is going to. And it's important that you've raised it, that debt that is being paid, because 80% of our tax revenue, what the Kenyan people are paying, what government is collecting from them, is being used to pay a debt. It is imperative for us to achieve accountability if that money, they know what debt they are paying for. Because as Jimmy will explain to us, over the last almost 10 years, we've paid over 5.4 trillion shillings as debt. And yet, in our debt books, we are being told we have 11 trillion Kenya shillings as debt. Why are you paying for this debt? It never goes down. It keeps going up. And we need to understand, was this debt taken for a particular project? Show us this project that is worth 11 trillion. What did it finance? And where was it in our budget? Did the Kenyan people in their parliament, in the Appropriation Act, identify a project which was financed? Because when you take a debt, you throw it in a project, that money must circulate in the economy. And the economy, when the money circulates, should be able to mop up and earn money out of that debt. The debt should be able to pay for itself once the money has circulated in our economy. Those are questions that Kenyans need to ask. William Ruto, in the last 2 years, 18 months, so to speak, has taken almost 1.8 trillion shillings in debt. Uhuru Kenyatta took over 6 trillion shillings in debt. We must ask, where was this debt anchored in our Appropriations Act? Where was public participation for this debt? And in the same period, you've paid 5.4 trillion shillings as debt. How comes then the debt is still 11 trillion? And did this money come into Kenya? Was it used for the benefit of the people of Kenya? What was our budget deficit, so to speak? That you can say, this was the balance, this was the deficit that we had to go into the market to raise. Because if your deficit in 10 years was only 1.3 trillion, then explain to us, why did you take a debt of up to almost 8 trillion? What were you borrowing for? You took loans of up to 6 trillion shillings when the budget deficit was only 1.3 trillion. And did this money land into Kenya? Because when we explain this concept, you'll notice that some of the money was taken and the money didn't even land in our consolidated fund. The money went into other private accounts, other people's accounts, accounts that are not in the CFS. The controller of budget cannot explain. In fact, if you ask her, she will say she cannot trace those payments that were made, even the receipt of the debt. All she can show you is that money left our CFS to pay for that debt. But she cannot show you money coming from the lender into our CFS account. The issue of domestic debt, our banks locally here issue treasury bills, every day government issues, and they go and take it up. Your own money, your deposits, because banks don't have their own money. It is your deposits they rely on. These banks have been buying bonds and bills every day. That bond and bill that they're floating and they're taking at exorbitant interest rates of almost 17%. Which project is it funding? Because according to our laws, project debt should only go into a project fund. But I will not speak much on it because today we have Jimmy WANJIGI, who has been very vocal on this issue. Maybe you can give him the mic to explain further on these concepts. And let me just say this. We come into this space as citizens who are concerned about the country. We are not coming into this space as politicians who are trying to campaign. And we are open to be asked any questions, to be interrogated. The information we share can be used by anybody, even in UDA, any Kenyan. Because what the Kenyan people are seeking is what will work for all Kenyans. Make Kenya work for all Kenyans. If the information comes from UDA, it will help. If the information comes from an ordinary citizen, it will help. The ultimate goal is to make sure that Kenya works for all Kenyans. Last time I'd said, let us not allow politicians to occupy and own this space. This is a citizen space that is meant to hold everybody accountable and to allow Kenyan people to understand and know the details of how their government is working and how their money is being utilized. If Jimmy can be allowed to speak, I think Amerix can allow him, or he can speak from because I'm with him. He can speak from my.
Yeah, he can speak from your end because I'm trying to
let me give him the mic.
These are the people, but I can't see them.
Okay, let me give him the. He is in, but the request has not been admitted.
Mercy, I'm looking for Mercy. All right, before we wait for Mercy, Nelson, you had a very interesting revelation. There is a JKI heist going on currently, and you are the one who blew the whistle that our airports are now being sold, or is it being leased for 30 years? Are you able to give us a brief overview of that, and what are we going to do as a country to ensure that our installation, our assets are not leased without public participation? Nelson. Hello, Nelson, can you hear me? Nelson? Hello, Nelson. Willis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Maybe Jimmy is here. You can just proceed now.
Maybe you can introduce the topic so that we go in bits. Yes, Jimmy, welcome.
Thank you, Amerix. I'm honored to be on. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry I couldn't have come on earlier. As you know, I was mourning my father. But now that we are here, let me be very clear. We are a country that is governed by laws. And everything we do is within that framework. Our government, and it's important people understand this because for many people it's not basic enough. A government simply operates to mobilize resources from the citizens of Kenya so that they can be used for the needs of all the citizens of Kenya. And to mobilize those resources, it has two avenues. One is taxation, which is the primary one, and the other is debt, which is simply supposed to be a top-up. That is all, a top-up. In fact, if you read the Constitution carefully, it is very clear that they expect us to have what you call a balanced budget, that we live within our means, the resources we are able to mobilize. Now, our 2010 Constitution and subsequent PFM, Public Finance Management Act, anchored what you call financial controls on our resources. Those financial controls embedded in the Constitution, embedded in PFM, are law In other words, you are not supposed to breach those provisions. But what happened from 2013 when the law became active? This is where we say, because we have bothered to do, I believe, the first forensic audit on our public debt. This is when the rain started beating us. This is when the biggest fraud on the people of Kenya occurred. And if you don't mind, I would like to explain this in detail. One thing my late father taught me a long time ago is that to be a leader or to be able to talk to people, you must be able to teach. People must learn. When they learn, they grow in their knowledge and their scrutiny. So we bothered to commission an audit on our public debt. And this audit is called a forensic audit. A forensic audit is an audit that looks at fraud. Is there been any avenue that the law has not been followed in the procurement of our public debt? So when the president the other day said he's got a forensic audit team, or task force as he called it, the first thing I looked at is on all those appointees, there's no forensic auditor at all. A forensic auditor is a very different breed from just a simple auditor. These are licensed people. And we bothered to get what was the foremost forensic auditor in Kenya, a man called Bernard Muchere, who had done a lot of internal audit for government for the last 41 years. He headed the team, and within, let's say, about 4 to 5 months, he had completed the entire job. These records are public, so there was nothing that was hidden. So what happens is that our laws anchor this debt. It says, for example, that debt must be on the budget. Number one. It says that debt in the medium to long term should only be taken for development. Number two. It says that you cannot borrow for recurrent expenditure. In other words, to pay salaries, or if people want to get on a jet plane to fly off to America, you can't pay for that. You can't pay for any other expenditure other than development. And then it says, number three, that if you want to borrow because you have cash flow problems, you can, but it must be within 1 year, and it must be paid within that 1 year. And on top of that, it gives a maximum, a ceiling. And the ceiling says this: it cannot be 5% more, it can only be a maximum of 5% of the total tax revenue, audited tax revenue returns of the previous financial year. So if you collected 2 trillion in tax revenue, then 5% means that you cannot take more than 100 billion. It also goes further to say that that is expected to be an overdraft at CBK. Now, that is the basis of our laws. One other provision I might like to say is what is called Article 214. Article 214 says there is the consolidated fund where all our revenue must be put in. So whether it's tax revenue, whether it is debt revenue, it must be put in one simple fund called the consolidated fund, one account, nothing else. So where did the rain start beating us? In 2013, the Uhuru Ruto government went to the parliament and they proposed an amendment number 1 to the Consolidated Fund, an amendment through the Public Finance Management Act, that you amend the Constitution, Article 214, through the Public Finance Management Act, which, as you and I know, is an illegality. You cannot amend the Constitution through an act. And they added 2 more provisions that were not in the Constitution, saying that money, in essence, do not have to enter the consolidated fund. That was the first. The second is that they introduced something called supplementary budget number 2. Supplementary budget number 2 was another foundation of fraud. If you read the provisions in the Constitution on a supplementary budget, first, it is an addition to the budget that has been passed by the end of June that year. So it is just supplementing the items there. And there is a maximum that the addition cannot be more than 10%. Now, that means that there's a ministry, for example, that is building a road, and they find that it was 100 shillings, and the cost has gone up to 110, so they ask for the 10 more. But it is already in the budget, 100 shillings. Now here, in supplementary 2, they suddenly decided they're introducing something called a new budget. A new budget with the new projects that were not in the previous budget passed in the appropriations of that June. So this is where the fraud began. Now, the fraud began with those two. So money started being borrowed that were not on the budget. Money started going into accounts that were not the consolidated fund. And our summary is simply this. And I'll give you a summary from July 2013 all the way to June 2023. 10 years. Remember, I said debt is a top-up. It is not a principle. So we said, let us look at the accounts of government. What is the government expenditure? How much did the government put on the budget for development? It was 6 trillion shillings. How much did they put for the counties? We put the figure. How much are their salaries over those 10 years? We put the figure. How much were their operations expenses? We put the figure. How much were their pensions? We put the figure. One item we removed, because this is what is called a primary balance, we removed one item called any debt payments. So we found a figure of 14.6 trillion. We said, very good. That's the sum total of 10 years. Fantastic. So how much income did we get? How much was KRA stating that they got? All right? So KRA, we did their actuals, not estimates. It's simple math. We calculated simple math, and that figure over that period was 13.3 trillion. So we had what you call a shortage of only 1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion was the only item that was needed for a budget, for all those budgets of 10 years. That is the top up that was required. That is what many economists like to call the deficit. Nice, simple, clean, 1.3 trillion. So we said, okay, how much did we borrow? We borrowed, Eric, to your shock, a figure of 7.7 trillion over the same period. In other words, if you do the subtraction of 1.3, 6.4 trillion more than we needed, more than was on any budget that had been put forward, more than any approval from Parliament, because Parliament approves a budget where the debt is anchored. That means that 6.4 did not go to anything for the sovereign called the Kenyan. It is simply a heist. But we didn't stop there. We went on. And we said, in the same period, how much money was allocated to debt payments? How much of our taxes, the ones that Kenyans sweat to pay, went towards our debt payments? Our figures had ended because we had done July, up to July 2022, we found we had paid 5.6 trillion. To June 2023, we added another 1.4. So there you have 7 trillion. Then this last financial year that has just passed, with the controversial bill that you're seeing people rejected, this last financial year, we paid another 1.8. So that is 9.8 trillion we have paid for debt payments, right? We overborrowed by 6.4. Okay? What are we being asked for today? The figure is 11 trillion. This figure does not come down. When we did our audit in 2022, it was 8.5. Today, it's going to 11 trillion. You now balance it between how much, what the dollar exchange rate is. This is a phenomena that we cannot deal with. This is a grievous fraud, and we are never meant to pay it. It is our chain, it is our slavery. And let me put that slavery in context as to the debt that has been taken. Two things I want to say. Our biggest problem is that you must understand that debt is tax in advance. Our taxes have to pay it. So you go back to our history, even before we had these great laws in the Constitution and PFM, Public Finance Management. When Moi handed over the economy of Kenya to Mwai Kibaki, Moi was collecting 170 billion in tax revenue. And he was paying, of every 100 shillings of that tax revenue, 28 shillings towards debt payment. He had in 1995 appealed to donors, in other words, the creditors, at a group called the Paris Club, and had gotten softer repayment terms. He was paying 28. He had rescheduled his debt. He was paying 28 shillings of every 100 to debt. So Kibaki takes the economy and he hands it over to Uhuru in 2013. And at that point, Kibaki has taken revenue to 1 trillion shillings, just under. Just under. And you know how much he was paying to debt of every 100? 18 shillings of every 100 shillings was going to debt payment. So he had brought it down. Great. We had seen the modernization of Kenya because Kibaki is the father of Kenya's modern age. In 2022, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, but I must say Uhuru and Ruto were in the same government, hands over to Ruto. And at that point, revenue had gone to something like 2.1 trillion. Double. But 70 shillings of every 100 was going to debt. Today, as we are talking, 80 shillings, just under 80 shillings of every 100 of tax revenue we sweat and contribute goes towards the payment of one item called debt. So you can understand why he wants to come and tax us more and do everything he can, because we are at that state where you have just a manager who is simply just receiving money and paying debt. He's not managing any other affair. That is the critical nature.
Wait, Jimmy. What did you say? I had something 80, 100, something. Can you repeat it so that it gets deeper into our own marrow?
Yes. Let me repeat it. Eric, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Let me repeat.
And I like the question that you asked to Jason earlier on about England and Spain do have their strengths, and England do have their strengths. And one of
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Just repeat that bit of 80, 100, something.
Yeah. I will come back.
How are our taxes being used? One person in his own personal account having 7.4 billion. 7.4 billion. You go up to Bungoma, where I come from, where poverty is the order of the day. 100 million is siphoned from Bungoma. What are you saying, Juan? What are you saying? What is he saying?
Yes, go on. What are you saying? Hello, Jimmy. We lost you. Mercy, I can see you here. How are you, Mercy?
Can you hear me?
Just hold on, Jimmy. Mercy?
Can you hear me, Amerix? Amerix, can you hear me?
Jimmy, we lost you. Mercy, can you hear me? Mercy?
Mercy?
We can hear you.
Yes, go on. Can you tell us what happened? Why? Because we say debt. The debt problem is because of the political class. And the political class begin this problem by hoodwinking the people down there, the rural people, the voters. They con and steal from them. Then they graduate from the rural voters to the treasury. Can you please tell us, Mercy, what happened down there in Uasin Gishu? Mercy. Mercy, is there a problem from your side? Mercy?
Eric, shall I continue? Can you hear me?
Okay, go on. A lot of confusion everywhere.
Sorry, Eric. I was saying, you asked me to repeat that for what is this about every 100? So what has happened is that when Moi handed over the economy of Kenya to Kibaki, he handed over a revenue base of taxation of 170 billion. That's the amount of tax Moi was collecting. He handed over a revenue base, 100 shillings of that debt, he was paying 28 of every 100 towards the payment of debt. When Kibaki handed over his economy to Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, he was collecting 1 trillion. He had taken revenue tax collection to 1 trillion from 170 by widening the economic base of Kenya, removing barriers to our growth. And of every 100 shillings of tax revenue, he was paying 18 shillings towards the payment of debt. Remember, debt is tax in advance. When Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta handed over to William Ruto, but I like to repeat that they were in the same government together. Tax revenue had gone to 2.1 trillion. But for every 100 shillings of that tax revenue, 70 shillings was going to one item called debt payments. Today, the end of the financial year 2023-2024, which ended June 30th, the calculations are the following: that for every 100 shillings, tax revenue has gone to 2.4. But for every 100 shillings of that 2.4, 80 shillings, just under 80 shillings is going towards the payment of debt. We are in an ICU situation. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, this debt did not come to us. It was never for our benefit. It is contrary to our laws, and we cannot and should not pay it. We should call it what it is, a fraud on the Kenyan people. And that fraud is leading to our strangulation and our enslavement, because this fraud continues for the next 10 years, unabatedly increasing. These debt payments do not decrease. We paid 1.8 this last financial year. We are paying a similar amount, probably even more, because I'm sure the dollar will not remain where it is. Then this coming financial year, it's going to be more in 2026. It will be horrific. This is why we are in the problems we are facing. And I want to explain this debt in terms of its composition. When Moi was rescheduling his debt, he was only dealing with one party called the Paris Club. That is where you have the bilateral donors. You have IMF, you have World Bank, you have what you call the bilateral agreement with, the Western world. Chinese debt. We have something else called the London Club. The London Club debts are the Eurobonds you've been hearing about, are the so-called syndicated loans from these Western banks that are really commercial loans. And then you have the fourth, which is called domestic debt. These bonds and bills people keep subscribing to every so often are fraud beyond your imagination. These are the 4 pockets. And I can tell you today.
Okay, Jimmy.
Yes.
Okay, Jimmy. Hold on a bit.
Yes.
Mercy, it's you I'm looking for. Mercy, go on. Your mic is on. Go ahead and speak. Mercy.
Mercy, can you hear me?
Mercy? All right. Let me go to Nelson. Nelson, there is that JKIA hist that you have unraveled. Could you please give us a 2-3 minutes overview of the entire hist and the entire theft?
Yes, thank you, Amerix. So over the past few days, I've been going through some documents from KAA, and it's very unfortunate that these things are happening without public participation, and it's in line with what Jimmy Wanjigi is saying, that the people in power right now are just concentrated on how they will enrich themselves and amass as much wealth from our own money and from the debts. And if you look at this deal, okay, let me start from the beginning. So,
hello. Thank you so much for hosting us. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mercy, we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Mercy, can you hear me? Okay.
All right. So thank you so much all for showing up. Thank you so much for hosting us. I'm going to start my presentation with a story. This story is about Chelangat Mutai. Then I will talk about the Finland scandal and the fertilizer scandal together with the bad seeds. Chelangat Mutai was when he was the vice president and the board chair of Highlands Girls High School, which is now Moi Girls High School. Why? For speaking truth to power. Chelangat Mutai did exams from outside, passed, and went to UN. Chelangat Mutai would write articles for the UN magazine that also spoke truth to power. There was a time that UN had a strike, and UN attributed some of her articles to a strike that took place. Chelangat Mutai was expelled again and went back to the village, where she started to teach. Chelangat Mutai got a scholarship to go to Harvard through a professor who was at UN. The only thing that they needed from her was a passport. She had accommodation, she had transport, she had everything. But now when it got to the passports, this is where the problem started. Moi declined to give Chelangat Mutai a passport. Instead, he took her file and he put it away and said that she's not going to get a passport. So they sent very many people to go and talk to him, her uncle who was in the military, her relatives, but he refused. And now this started her career. How? Because kama mumekata atoke Kenya, she decided she was going to make Kenya work for her. That is how she became the first woman, first Kalenjin woman, and the youngest member of parliament in Kenya. The Wasingishu Finland Canada scandal. I'm not going to talk about myself or any of the students. Today, I will talk about 4 parents. Only 4 out of 379 parents. Number 1 is Guka. If you listened to me, ile siku nikiongea, niliuliza those leaders, nikauliza, nyinyi mumesema tukuje meeting hii time. Mumefika saa ngapi? Guka hapa hajakula. The Guka that I was talking about was 75 years old at the time. He lost 1.2 million to this scandal. How? He had a grandson. aka decide now, okay, now I cannot give you this land because this land is, by the time in Africa, when you need to help yourself, it is not going to be enough. So what am I going to do? This is your inheritance. But because unataka kwenda kusoma, what I am going to do is I am going to sell this land so that I pay for you school fees, you go. So he sold the inheritance of the grandson. Then these people, he was very vocal in the beginning, very, very vocal. He would talk about it, he would come for meetings, and then all of a sudden, he would not show up. You would go look for him, and he would just be silent na anawaambia nyinyi, mtulie tu, watawalipa tu, msijali. And so you wonder, what did these guys do to Guka so that he does not want to speak? Because he was not paid. We asked him, were you paid? He said, I was not paid. There's a widow who had her firstborn in this scandal. Again, she paid 1.2 million. And she got this money by selling her property. She sold her plot with her house inside it, inside the plot. So she sold, aliuza nyumba na kauza plot yake. Siku hizi wanaishi kwa rentals. So that huyu mtoto akitoka hapa, akuje asaidie siblings wake, waone venye make, yani watajisaidia tu in this life. Now they are living in a rental house. Unaweza imagine majirani wakipita what they say, because first of all, she's a woman. Secondly, yeye ni widow. Third, sahi aliuza shamba yao. Sasa sahi wako kwa rent. Can you imagine the shame, first of all, and then the mental torture that huyu mzazi ana go through? You have sold everything, wewe na mtoto wako mnakaa hapo kwa nyumba, mnaangaliana, mnashangaa tutafanya nini? There's no, when you ask these people, they wanauliza, wewe ulipea Mandago pesa yako, ama ulipea Chelili, ama ulipea nani? And you know very well, ulilipa kwa county. There's a widower who had 3 kids. He lost 4.2 million to this, 4.2. He sold his 5 acres of land. Na kama wewe unatoka Shags, ata anyone knows how land is so precious. Very precious. Akauza 5 acres. Na tulikuwa tumepewa 2 weeks. 2 weeks mkuwe mmeleta pesa. Kama hujaleta pesa, unakuwa disqualified. So this man, he's a widow. He has raised his 3 daughters. Ameenda ameuza shamba yake in 14 days. So that means hiyo shamba imeenda at a throwaway price, because you cannot get a buyer in that span of time mwenye atanunua na that amount, like the right amount of money. So he lost 4.2 million. Tulienda mkutano, the last meeting alikuja, tulikuwa na Chelili, Mbarorot na Mandago, na akawaambia, mimi nimelipa pesa zangu. Niliuza shamba, na akasema niliuza shamba zangu eka 5, nikalipa 4.2 million. Sahi sina mahali pa kuenda. Sasa wacha nirudi nyumbani. Nikifika huko nikae tu, mtakuja mnizike. The worst thing is that this man would not have found out about this, because anatoka huko ndani, ziwa ndani. He would never have found out about this kama these leaders hawangeenda kwa grassroots levels during burials, wedding ceremonies, na kuambia watu, you know what guys, we have this program that is taking people abroad. So he sold his 5 acres. You can imagine. And now when he asks again, anaulizwa, wewe ulipea pesa yako nani? Lastly, I will talk about a parent with 2 kids. This man lost 2.5 million Kenya shillings. He had 2 daughters in this scandal. He paid 2.5 million to the same account. Then, this thing, pesa ikapotea. Baka sahi, bado sisi wote, everyone mwenye alikuwa kwa hii kitu, ako Kenya. Ilibidi ametoka Wasingishu kwa sababu this was his pension. Ilikuwa mpango yake. Alikuwa amejiambia, unajua, niko na watoto. Nikilipia watoto hizi pesa, wanaweza jisaidia kimaisha, waone kenye watafanya, waende wasome, maybe in 1 year, 2 years, wanaweza rudi Kenya wanisaidie. So hivyo. Sahi wote wako nyumbani. Imebidi atoke Wasingishu, ameenda Baringo. Kufanya nini? Farming. Farming gani? Ya nyanya. All of us know, if you're a farmer, unajua, how farming ya nyanya ni very, very, yani inahitaji so much care. It is not like maize where you just plant and then you leave, you go. This is tomatoes, which require you to stay hapo the whole season. Huyu mtu ametoka civilization, ameenda uko in the middle of nowhere. Why? Again, to start over. A 60, 65-year-old man trying to start over. Aone venye atajisaidia kimaisha. Wamechukua hizi pesa. Na sahi tena mkienda kuuliza, wanauliza wewe ulipea Chelili mpesa, ulipea Mandago pesa, ulipea Barorot pesa, ulipea nani? But
okay,
that is what your government can do for you.
All right, Mercy. Just
so nyinyi mnawapea pesa and then wana decide mmetupea pesa. Sasa let us put it into better use.
Right.
So mbona mna complain na nyinyi mko ndani ya serikali? Si huyu ni mtu wenu mwenye anawatakia mema. Si mmempea pesa. Si mumpe time aende put your money into better use. Why are you hurrying? Why are you disturbing
Just
people?
hold on, Mercy.
Why can't you wait? We put your money into better use and then decide that we are going to now pay for you school fees if we want, or maybe refund.
All right.
Then they will ask you, why are you fighting a government that is working? Because see, the government is working. Everyone can see. You pay your money, the government works for you. It takes your money, it puts it into better use. And then now what you have to do is wait. Wait so that you can see the fruits of this labor.
All right.
Sasa juzi, they have decided.
All right,
because
Mercy. Hold on there.
I don't want a job. I do not want a job.
Hold on
the
there,
thing
Mercy.
that ilileta all of this is I was supposed to go to school. So why do you want to give me a job when ningekuwa nimeenda kusoma? Now they have seen they cannot get to me. So they start using proxies. You start talking to my family and start telling them, kwani huyu mtoto ameulizia appointment akanyimwa. Ameulizia dialogue akanyimwa. Ameapproach nani akakataa kumpea kazi. Huyu mtoto anataka kuenda kufanya kazi wapi? Mbona tunaongelea kazi ya mtu mmoja na kuna 379 others who are suffering, who have sold their land, who have sold their property penye wanaishi.
All right, Mercy. Hold there.
But that is your government for you.
She can't hear me well. Let me bring in Francis. Gaido, what is your comment on all these issues of politicians stealing money, stealing loans, looting money all over? What do you think is the way forward here? What are we going to do as citizens? Because we cannot keep on talking, tweeting, writing, posting. We need action. We need to take action.
We need to take action, Amerix. We are tired of this bullshit. We are tired of the garbage we are seeing everywhere. So let me tell you something weird I observed today. So after the Trump assassination attempt, then immediately I saw Elon Musk. Elon Musk said that he has endorsed Donald Trump for the presidency in light of the happenings of today. Now, I was like, can you imagine if a businessman in Kenya tried endorsing a candidate for president, what would happen? We have seen the repercussions. We have seen everything that happens in Kenya when you align with one individual or presidential candidate. It's become so bad that if you are involved in politics, you are socially and economically isolated. We saw during especially Uhuru's presidency, which was very vindictive, very toxic, Uhuru ensured that everyone was below him because he wanted to remain as the alpha and omega. And so we have to anchor our economic policies to transcend individual or personal party loyalties and whatever. so that we don't have a situation where we have one singular individual whose only ambition in life is to ensuring everyone else falls so that he can remain on top. That was one thing I noticed. I was just trying to juxtapose what was happening there to here. But then we come to why we are in the situation we are in, who is influencing our policies, who is deliberately crafting our downfall, who is making sure that we remain poor, we remain an oppressed people. Number one, I can always say it's the opportunists, the people who have profited from our misery, our collective misery. Is number one is the foreigners. Personally, I like calling them, please pardon me for my French, I like calling them Muzungu pieces of shit. Not the entire race, but the ones who are narcissistic enough to be able or to craft the ideology that only them should prosper and the rest should be below them. So we've been talking about capital flight, and one of our biggest problem in Kenya is that, and they have hoodwinked us. For instance, I started hearing of something called the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, since the 80s and then or the 90s and the 2000s, and they made it look like access for our products to the American market is a privilege. Yet we are good designers, yet we have the raw material, yet we have the expertise to, for instance, when you go to America, you go to one of the Woolworths or whatever stores, you go Walmart, I don't think they have Woolworths, but you go to Walmart and whatnot, you're going to see jeans, you're going to see clothes which are written made in Kenya. So they've been made in our EPZ factories here in Athi River and whatnot. And they go there just to be labeled, just to be put a brand, if it's Levi Strauss and whatnot. And yet the same can get into the local market. But then they erect entry barriers. They erect entry barriers for even local entrepreneurs so that our products, which are made with our cotton and with our labor and with our resources, can access a foreign market. And we cannot get the same quality here. So it's almost like we are beneath them. It's almost like it's been institutionalized. It's almost like the bureaucratic pieces of shit who work in KRA, who work in Treasury, are conspiring with these foreigners to ensure that we remain as oppressed people. You look at our coffee. Our coffee is diminishing in our production, but the best of our coffee is taken outside the country. And then they go and take just a fraction of it, 10%, and then they mix it with 90% of Brazilian coffee, and then it is imported here as Nescafe, and you idiots are here, you are celebrating that you are drinking coffee, yet it is 10% of the same coffee that your parents and grandparents are growing in their farms. You understand? So we've been deliberately put in this state. And then they come and scaremonger you and tell you, build and fashion all these narratives about stability and economic prosperity, but it is them who are prosperous, as we are remaining here consuming third-rate products while we have the capacity to build. And one thing we should be focusing on is domestic consumption, value addition, so that when we are exporting something, we are not exporting to a go down in Dubai so that it can be value added and packed and branded. We can do all of that here and create those jobs so that we sell to these Muzungu pieces of shit at the same value, at the same marked up value that they would buy from somebody else. And that is what farmers in Latin America are doing. So it is, and that contempt continues spreading to how we approach our immigration. For instance, in Kenya, any foreigner can land in JKIA and get a visa on arrival. But us, we go to the US Embassy, you are queued there. They make us go through hoops. They take our application fees. They don't even refund. Which is why I was saying the other place we should be occupying is occupying US Embassy. Because how do they charge $200 for an application where they already have a quota where they know we are going to allow these ones? They already have a quota. So today they say we are only allowing 20 or 30. So everyone there, you are just going as a formality because they have they are pre-decided and predetermined who is going to get a visa and who is not going to. And then we have seen this Meg Whitman. She has insinuated herself so much in our policy making. She's taking selfies. She's doing a lot of PDA with Ruto. And I'm saying, who the fuck does she think she is? She's just a mere diplomat brought here to serve a purpose. She's supposed to be neutral. She is not even hiding that she's pro this faction of the political divide. She doesn't care about Kenyans. She's here serving commercial interests. And we as Kenyans are supposed to clap for her because Ruto held an umbrella for her. That is the highest form of contempt. We are here because of colonialism. These are the offshoots of colonialism in the 60s and the 70s, and we still find ourselves in the age of the Aquarius. We are still complying with such nonsensical PR stunts. So if we are saying occupy everywhere, we also include occupy US Embassy, because number one, they have enabled this rogue regime. They have facilitated all these things you're seeing, the murders and the genocide and the massacres in Githurai and Rongai. But over and above that, they have implemented, because we have a weak Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have implemented some immigration policy where Kenyans are made to feel as if we are going to beg for visas. You should make those decisions earlier, so that if you're not going to give somebody a visa, you're going to refund 75% of the educational or of the applicational fees. And I think everyone, we are on board with that. I'm going to touch on something about education. We are where we are because, number one, of our media is very toxic. You have seen how they tried to suppress the numbers of the people in Kware, in Mukuru kwa Jenga. They were lying blatantly. Linus Kaikai, shame on you if you're listening. You're full of shit, you journalists. Journalists should not be allowed anywhere where we are doing our protests or doing our activities. Because if you're going to get the real information from the people and then you go and alter it because you've been paid by State House, then we should not allow you to be there. So journalists are one part of the problem. Number two, we have religion. And number three, we have the educational curriculum. We've been talking about something called the quota system. I've been speaking about it severally. So during the Moi era, they came up, and during 844, they came up with something called the quota system, where now they select. It's almost like they sieve. It's almost like they cherry pick the best brains, which will go to some certain schools which have better facilities than the others. But if you look, and Jimmy was talking about the amount of money that has, we've been expending in the name of debt. We've been collecting. Now this year they've collected 2 trillion in taxes. They are going to borrow another probably 2 to 3 trillion in loans. But we are not seeing anything on the ground. The counties are not building anything. So the quota system, and there is this misconception that the government built Alliance School or the government built Mangu High School. No, the schools were started and they were donated by colonialists. They were donated by the colonialists because they had grabbed our land. Now they wanted to make some concessions to hoodwink the people who are stupid by then, to be hoodwinked with a church. It was always the Holy Trinity. So there was always a church, a school, and a hospital. So they hoodwink you with that. They give you that trilogy. And so the land was what was donated, and then they mostly donated it to the church. But the parents who took their children there were always charged a development fee, and that development fee was in every fee structure. And that is what was used to build the schools. Over and above that, there used to be harambes. So there is nobody who can claim that the government has ever built any school. But why do we find ourselves with this so-called capitation? And again, I repeat that you idiots who are saying that Matiang'i should be president, you need to understand that they allocated hundreds of billions of shillings over 10 years to go to capitation, money that should have gone to build schools instead. So that instead of converting social amenities like halls into or dining rooms or whatever, instead of converting them into boarding facilities, then we would have expanded the educational facilities and educational access. I gave you another example. There's this saying that the closest school is the best school. So instead of having a boarding school where I saw there's a lady called Karibi who sings, and her son got an accident when he was leaving Chavakali coming back to Nairobi. Why are we subjecting students to these long journeys to go to school? What we should be doing, the closest school is the best school. Like now Nairobi, all the schools were amazing if you look at Upper Hill and whatever, but because subsequent boards, subsequent management, subsequent counties neglected them, so the schools have reduced and fallen in stature and in their quality of education they provide, but they were high-end schools if you look at them today. But even Kibera Olympic, it used to lead in the KCPE results. So what we need is not now to come up with more entry barriers under the guise of quota system and whatnot. Every county, every CDF, every constituency receives no less than 110 million per year. The cost of building a school is 10 million. Why are we all cramming? We are chasing all of us to go to Mangu, to go to Alliance, to go to where, while we should be concentrating on the amount of money that is stolen in the grassroots. You understand? It's the same thing with hospitals. The cost of building a referral hospital, KU, which was the last one, was 10 billion Kenya shillings. Why is everyone rushing to Nairobi to KNH while these governors are just blowing a lot of money? We already have the numbers. Thankfully, because of the likes of Jimmy Wanjigi, we've been able, I knew there was corruption. Trust me, 2 years ago, I knew there was corruption. I knew they used to steal money. I just never put it into context, the level at which the theft is perpetrated by the political class until I saw the actual numbers. So this is real. We are speaking about people who are repatriating our money, stashing it into foreign accounts. I was contacted by a group who said that they are the people who are behind Ruto not addressing the Congress, and they said now they are mapping all the bank accounts, foreign bank accounts that are stashing Kenyan proceeds of crime. Those are the same people you celebrate in the country. Those are the same people who you love and adore and whatever. So